You are not a violent person. You have never hurt anyone. You hold doors open for strangers. You feel guilty when you forget to tip. You would never in your right mind join a mob and destroy someone's life. And yet, under the right conditions, you would. Not because you are secretly evil, not because there is something broken in you that no one can see, but because the same brain that makes you kind, generous, and empathetic, that exact same brain, contains a switch, and crowds know exactly how to flip it. This is not a theory. It is one of the most replicated findings in all of social psychology, and the moment you understand how it works, you will never look at a crowd the same way again. Let's start with a number: 65%. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram ran an experiment at Yale University that would go on to disturb everyone who heard about it. Ordinary people, teachers, postal workers, engineers were brought into a lab and told to administer electric shocks to another person every time they answered a question incorrectly. The shocks weren't real, but the participants didn't know that. They heard screaming, they heard begging, they heard silence, and 65% of them kept going all the way to the maximum voltage, a level labeled on the machine simply as XXX. They weren't sadists. They weren't monsters. They were you. What Milgram discovered wasn't that humans are secretly cruel. What he discovered is that humans are wired at a very deep level to defer to authority and to the social context around them. When someone in a position of authority says, "Continue," something in your brain shifts. The weight of the decision feels like it belongs to someone else. You are just following instructions. You are just doing your part. You are just one person in a larger structure. Psychologists call this the agentic state of mental mode, where you stop seeing yourself as the author of your own actions and start seeing yourself as an instrument of someone else's will. Plain English, you stop feeling responsible. And the moment responsibility disappears, behavior that would be unthinkable in private becomes possible in a group. But authority is only one of the forces at work. The deeper, stranger force is something called deindividuation. Deindividuation, and this word is worth understanding, is what happens to your sense of self when you dissolve into a crowd. Your individual identity, the thing that makes you you, begins to blur. You stop monitoring your own behavior the way you normally would. The internal voice that says, "Wait, should I really be doing this?" goes quiet. You are no longer a person making choices. You are part of something larger. And that feeling, strangely, is not frightening. It can feel electric, liberating, like taking off a heavy coat. The psychologist, Philip Zimbardo, who would later run the infamous Stanford prison experiment, studied deindividuation for decades. He found that when people were made to feel anonymous, given masks, uniforms, or simply absorbed into a large crowd, their behavior shifted in predictable ways. They became more aggressive, more willing to harm, more likely to act on impulses they would normally suppress. The mask doesn't just hide your face, it changes what you think you are allowed to do. And here is where it gets unsettling. This is not a flaw that only some people have. It is a feature of human psychology that applies to nearly everyone. What does it take to turn a normal person cruel? Apparently not much. A uniform, a role, a crowd of people doing the same thing, and the quiet disappearance of individual accountability. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in all of moral psychology: diffusion of responsibility. When you are alone and someone needs help, the weight of that falls entirely on you. But when you are in a crowd, that weight gets distributed across everyone present. Each person carries a fraction of it, and a fraction of a moral burden psychologically feels like no burden at all. This is why crowds can do things that no individual member would do alone. This is why bystanders watch violence without intervening. This is why online pylons reach thousands of people before anyone stops to ask whether the target actually deserves it. The larger the group, the smaller each person's felt share of responsibility, and the easier it becomes to act in ways that, alone in a room, you would be ashamed of. So let's reconstruct the scene. Imagine you are part of an online community, a public figure, a writer, a comedian, someone with a platform. says something that your group finds offensive. Someone posts about it. Then someone else does. Then thousands of people share it. You read the comments. The mood is certain, righteous, electric. Everyone agrees this person is bad. So you add a comment. Something small. A single line. You are not the one who started it. You are not the one throwing the hardest punch. You are just one voice among thousands. But here is what is happening inside your brain at that moment. Your sense of individual identity has partially dissolved into the group. Your moral compass has recalibrated to the group's norms rather than your own. Your share of responsibility feels close to zero because other people are doing the same thing. And the target, the person on the other end, has stopped feeling fully human to you. They have become a symbol, a representative of something wrong, an outgroup member. Henry Tajfel, a Polish-British psychologist who survived the Holocaust as a young man, spent his life studying exactly this. He developed social identity theory, the idea that a significant part of how you see yourself comes from the groups you belong to. When your group is threatened or wronged, your identity is threatened. And when someone becomes the enemy of your group, your brain begins a quiet process of moral exclusion. You stop extending to them the same moral consideration you give to people inside your circle. They become less real, less deserving, and the things your group does to them begin to feel not just acceptable, but justified. Hannah Arendt, the philosopher who covered the trial of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in 1961, noticed something that shook her deeply. Eichmann was not a monster. He was not driven by hatred or bloodlust. He was, by all observable measures, completely ordinary, banal even. He had done what he did because he was following orders, doing his job, playing his role in a vast system where individual moral judgment had been handed over to the group. Arendt called it the banality of evil. The idea that the most terrifying acts in human history were not committed by extraordinary villains, but by ordinary people who had simply stopped thinking for themselves. The most dangerous person in a mob is not the sadist in the front row. It is the person in the middle who has simply stopped asking whether what they are doing is right. And now the modern mirror. You do not need a physical crowd to experience this. You need only a comment section, a group chat, an algorithm that surfaces content your tribe already agrees with. The psychological mechanisms are identical. Anonymity encourages de-individuation. Group approval replaces individual moral judgment. Responsibility dissolves across thousands of accounts. The target is reduced to a symbol of whatever the group has decided to be against. This is not a political observation. It happens on every side of every debate. It happens in workplaces, in friend groups, in families. Groupthink, the tendency of a group to suppress dissenting voices in favor of consensus, silences the internal voice that might otherwise say, wait. Conformity pressure, studied exhaustively by Solomon Asch in his famous line experiments, shows that people will deny the evidence of their own eyes rather than contradict the group around them. You have felt this. Maybe in a meeting where you stayed quiet because everyone else agreed. Maybe in a conversation where you laughed at something you found cruel because the room expected you to laugh. Maybe in a comment thread where you said nothing while watching someone be destroyed because it felt easier, safer, less lonely to stay invisible. The question is not whether these forces affect you. They do. They affect everyone. The question is whether you know they are there. Because here is the thing that Milgram and Zimbardo and Tajfel and Arendt were all pointing toward from different angles. Awareness is the only lever you actually have. The eugenic state loosens its grip the moment you name it. Deindividuation loses its power the moment you reassert your individual identity. The fusion of responsibility collapses the moment you say, "This decision is mine." The crowd does not make you cruel. It removes the barriers that normally keep the cruelty contained. And the barrier that matters most is not politeness or law or fear of punishment. It is the simple, quiet, radical act of thinking of yourself as a person, a specific, accountable, morally responsible individual rather than a fraction of a crowd. You are not a violent person, but now you know exactly what it would take to make you one, and exactly what it takes to stay who you are.